We are live.
Okay. Everybody's good to go? Okay. Just got a note from Morgan, his laptop's freezing. You're there though, Morgan? Can you hear us? Just give him a second here. Councillor Nagel, are you maybe try rebooting here, or whatever we're going to call it nowadays? Relaunch. There we go.
Hey, did you guys see my message I put in the chat?
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with this tablet. I almost never use it. I do all my work emails on my desktop and on my phone, but for some reason this thing just, it was crashing lots our last couple of meetings as well. So if I disappear, I'll come back as quickly as possible.
Okay, well, we are live and you're with us now, Morgan?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll call the meeting to order. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, administration and all the members of the public and business community that are watching, I'm sure, today. I just want to start off by saying thank you to the community for all of the feedback that we have been receiving over the past few days. It's always good to hear from the community on issues. So Cochrane, as we've been saying right from the beginning, has done very, very well throughout this pandemic. We have, despite our proximity to the city, been able to keep our numbers in a very manageable spot, and that's no different today. So again, I want to say thank you to all of my colleagues on council for all you guys have been doing throughout this. It's not been an easy time. Generally, we would be celebrating some summer and having a break at this point, but we're right back at it as duty calls. And this has been an extraordinary issue to have to grapple with as a community and as a council. So the reason we're here today, obviously, is to discuss masks, and it is no surprise. It is in response to what our neighbors to the east have done, the city of Calgary, mandating masks and talking about their bylaw that I believe is taking effect August 1st. And we'll hear more about that in the presentation from administration. But we are, in a sense, responding as a community to what our neighbors have done, and obviously with the proximity, like I stated, what they do has an impact on what we feel as residents and as a community. So today is a meeting that we have called so that we as a community can have our own discussions about masks, and we will get right to it. And before we just get started, I do want to say thank you to administration. These are unprecedented times. We continue to have to react and respond to COVID. And I was joking about it earlier, but careful what you joke about. And I'm not making light of COVID by any means, but it just seems to be we get our feet under us and then we have to deal with something else that is just takes it to another level altogether. And masks has been that, another level altogether. So I do appreciate all the work administration has done to pull today's meeting together, the agenda and the proposed bylaw that we are talking about today. Thank you. It's been a lot of work in a short time to respond to today's meeting. I just want to note that I've heard from a lot of teachers and a lot of parents that are worried about kids in schools and masks as it pertains to schools. We will not be debating that today. That is a school division jurisdiction and something that the province will likely weigh in on at a later date. I did hear from our trustee, Ms. Gilbert, about that, and the school boards obviously will be defining that path forward on their own, obviously in conjunction with ourselves. So we'll not be debating masks in schools today at all. So that being said, today's agenda has one item. It is the face coverings and the proposed bylaw. And maybe before we get started, I do have to approve the agenda if we're going to be following all of our procedures. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Councillor Reid? You'll move to adopt the agenda, or do you have an addition? You're okay? Motion to adopt. I can see everybody. We'll just go by hands. Everybody in favor of the agenda? The one item agenda? Thank you. That carries. And we'll turn it over to the podium. Ms. Lowe, you have a presentation for us today?
I do. Good morning, Mayor and Council. If you'll just give me a moment while I work with technology to share my screen.
Absolutely.
Are you all seeing the presentation slide that says Bylaw 2020 face coverings, July 29th, 2020?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So as a bit of a history, because I think it sets the stage for the proposed bylaw today, just looking back to how we got here and the basis for the decisions that we were making. So on March 13th, the town of Cochrane enacted the Municipal Emergency Plan. Thereafter, on March 17th, the province declared the public health emergency and identified the 4 objectives of flatten the curve, avoiding overwhelming the healthcare system, keeping critical systems and people working, and communication. And I know we've all seen those before and are very familiar with them. Throughout, administration and the ECC have actively worked to mirror those provincial objectives throughout our responses and decisions. We've been following the direction of AHS and basing our decisions on their guidance and protocols, which they develop based on science and the healthcare system's experience. During the week of June 22nd, town administration launched our staff reintegration and reopening plan, and that plan was based on objectives that are safety, a phased approach, communication, keeping the curve flat, and being prepared. So generally, the safety is to ensure safety and well-being of staff and the public, and making sure that our decisions are based on that. The phased approach allows us to transition through our reentry and reopening stages, allowing for learnings and adjustments as we go. Communication has been key throughout, ensuring that both council staff and our community at large remain informed. Of course, keeping the curve flat and making sure that we have the necessary protocols and processes in place to ensure that Cochrane is doing our part to prevent the spread. And then again, the be prepared, which is about having the protocols to respond quickly, having it in place to ensure that we can appropriately respond should there be a second wave, a staff infection, or a change in public health order requirements. As we're seeing numbers increase in Calgary and across the region, it is time to go back to those objectives and evaluate and ensure that we have appropriate measures in place to be prepared. As of this morning, we have in Cochrane 6 active cases, and the Cochrane Springbank area is reporting 15. The intent of Bylaw 2020 is to deliver on that objective of being prepared. Is proposing a measured approach based on Alberta's relaunch strategy metrics with a conversion to per capita, providing conservative threshold numbers for Cochrane. The Alberta relaunch strategy has statuses within it, which are based upon the following. So an open status is an area with low risk, where they believe no additional restrictions need to be in place. It is less than 50 active cases per 100,000. If we convert that to a per capita number so that it makes sense for Cochrane, that would be approximately 15. So that would be less than 15 cases. The watch status is where the province is monitoring the risk, discussing with local governments and other leaders the possible need for additional health measures. That watch status is based on at least 10 cases and more than 50 per 100,000. So that would be at least 10, and with more than 50 per 100,000, again, that's that approximately 15 in the Cochrane context. Enhanced status is where risk levels require enhanced public health measures to control the spread, and that will be informed by local context. So using that criteria, the bylaw drafted proposes that if Cochrane were to reach 10 active cases, which is the conservative application of the provincial watch status, the Director of Emergency Management has the authority to immediately implement mandatory face coverings in all public places and public vehicles. If it were implemented, deactivation of that mandatory provision would occur automatically when case numbers are reported as being below 10 in Cochrane for 14 consecutive days. The bylaw also establishes that Council can implement or deactivate mandatory provisions by resolution at any time. The bylaw includes exceptions which are similar to those that you have seen in the communities where mandatory face masks have been implemented. Ours would require that, or would exempt children under the age of 5, people with underlying medical conditions or disabilities, people unable to safely remove or place a face covering without someone helping them, people eating or drinking in a public premise, participating in fitness activities, caregivers for those with disabilities if that hinders the person's accommodation that they are assisting, and temporary removal for necessary to provide or receive a service. As with any bylaw, the bylaw does contain necessary regulatory enforcement parameters. However, the intent is that the focus will be on education first, with an emphasis on communication. That has been a consistent message across the region, and we feel that that is important, especially in this instance. The town's communication team has prepared media. They've been supporting all of our efforts throughout our response to COVID-19, and they've been promoting the encouragement for residents to ensure they're doing the right thing and employing the right measures to keep themselves and one another safe. So this is an example of what's been being promoted through our social media channels and otherwise, and this is promoting the voluntary use of masks where appropriate. Again, another rendering that they have prepared that will be spread out through social media and other mediums. Wear your mask here. This is proposed as being the schedule to the Bylaw 2020, and it will be the required notice that businesses will have to produce and display in their locations. And then another rendering from the communications team. So Bylaw 2020 continues the implementation of protocols in Cochrane based on thoughtful, measured approach with consideration of the provincial guidelines and recommendations. It is balancing the need for individual responsibility and municipal management of risks in the effort to ensure that efforts are made to prevent the spread of the virus. So administration is recommending that council give all 3 readings to the bylaw today. We believe that this will ensure legislation is in place in the event that it was needed to mandate the wearing of face coverings in the future within Cochrane. And I'm of course available for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lowe. We have in front of us today a proposed bylaw, and if we could get a motion for first reading, we'll get into second reading and some discussion. A motion for first reading, Councillor Fedeco. All those in favor of first reading? That carries. A motion for second reading. Councillor Fedeco as well. Okay, all those in favor? Or sorry. Second reading discussion. So
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, whoa, slow down.
I'm blowing through it, Councillor Nagel. No, it's all good. Okay, so Councillor Nagel, you have a comment.
Yeah, I'll start with questions. So first off, when we say public spaces, are we referring to public spaces in the sense that they're owned by the government, like parks and public facilities, or are we talking just anywhere where there's people, so including all private businesses? And does that impact yards, or how does that work?
It would include indoor, all indoor public places, so that would be private businesses. So how it's defined in the bylaw is that it means all or any part of a building, structure, or other enclosed area to which members of the public have access to as of a right or by express or implied invitation, but it would not include premises for which there's an enrollment or membership requirement in order to access it. So that's the exclusion where it does not incorporate schools into the discussion.
Okay, and then does that also mean that it wouldn't be applicable to the fitness studios? Well, I did see fitness activities in there, actually. Never mind. So next question, with regards to enforcement, is there currently no penalty associated with not following this bylaw? Is that what that enforcement piece of the bylaw means?
There is a penalty that could be applied in the event that enforcement action was necessary. Failure to wear a face covering where required would have a specified penalty of $100, and failure to display the prescribed signage would have a specified penalty of $200. But again, it would not be municipal enforcement's mandate to actively enforce, more so to actively educate.
So there's a $200 penalty for every single business that does not put up that poster that we've created?
Correct, the poster that forms part of the bylaw. If in the event the mandatory face coverings was implemented.
And then my third question for clarification, when we're talking about face coverings, are we talking about anything that goes on top of your face, whether it's a homemade mask or a napkin or a bandana, or does it have to be a medically certified N95 mask or anything like that?
Yeah, so the definition means a mask or other face covering that covers mouth, nose, and chin, which ensures that there's a barrier. So it could be a bandana, it could be a homemade mask. It's not that prescriptive.
Okay, and then I know everybody else has lots to say. I'm not going to go on a giant monologue or rant discussing why I don't support this thing, but the long story short is I think this entire bylaw is an overreach of government. I think it's setting a bad precedent. And I do have one request for council to please consider carefully is if everybody is going to, or a majority of council is going to be supporting this bylaw today, can we please put a deadline on this bylaw so that it does not last forever? And with that in mind, I'd actually like to propose a formal amendment that this bylaw only be in effect until December 31st, 2020.
If I may, Councillor Nagel, I think what the bylaw states, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Lowe, that if the cases were to drop below the 10 for a consecutive 14-day period, the bylaw would automatically be rescinded.
So the
sorry, you go ahead.
if the mandatory provisions of the bylaw are implemented because of the case numbers going above 10, then there would be automatically a deactivation of that mandatory requirement once active cases fall below 10 for 14 consecutive days. The bylaw, however, would remain in place and could then be implemented at any point in time if there were active cases above that 10 threshold.
And if I could respond, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I did understand that that's what this bylaw means. It's the authority to enact a requirement, and I still would like to see a sunset clause on this bylaw, because if COVID trickles around for two or 3 years, or say it comes back next year or the year after, I don't want this bylaw lasting forever and becoming, quote, the new normal. And that's everything I have to say for now.
So if I understand your amendment correctly, Councillor Nagel, it is about mandating on and off the bylaw itself. You'd like a sunset clause on it for the end of the year.
Yes.
Not the mandate number of like the cases or anything. You're talking about the bylaw itself.
The bylaw itself, yes.
Okay. Okay. You guys are challenging me today. Amendments. Okay, so we'll talk about, we should talk about the amendment, I guess, before we get back to the bylaw, if we're going to be following procedure, but maybe we can go through everybody's comments and maybe it'll work itself out at the same time. So Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, anyhow, thank you very much. It's hard to believe we're having this meeting talking about this issue, and I think it's disappointing. I mean, my first point is I really do believe that this is a provincial mandate and it shouldn't have fallen to the municipalities, but it's been very much the direction of the government that they want the municipalities to address this, and it's important. And so I do like how this has been laid out. I think it's very practical. I think having it key in on the 10 point, which is reflective of the provincial science of when we want to move from open to watch, I believe the language is. And so, but in reviewing this, I just want to share the beliefs that I'm coming from on this. So COVID-19 cases are on the rise. We can't afford to go back into a lockdown. It's a dangerous virus, so anybody who's contacted me to saying it's not, I fundamentally disagree with you. We've had just about 9,000 deaths in Canada. Cochrane, or Alberta's had over 187. Cochrane's been fortunate. We haven't had any deaths here yet. Masks work. They're not the only solution. They're part of the toolbox. I think this feeds into that. And our priority is to keep our residents, safe and healthy. And our next priority is to keep our economy functioning. And I don't know a business that can afford another shutdown. So we need to protect our business environment. With this disease, with this virus, there's more unknowns than knowns. We don't really know how serious it is, the long-term impacts. There's studies just starting to come out on that. Damage to your lungs and to your hearts, we don't know that. We don't know the true nature of the infection rate. We probably will never know that. But both Ontario and Quebec have done some preliminary studies on excess death rates, and they're showing 20 to 30%. And whether that's directly related to COVID or people staying home or higher suicides or whatever it's linked to, you are seeing excess death rates across the world. And at the end of the day, with all those numbers, the only one that really matters is one. How could we as community leaders, if somebody dies of COVID, be able to say to our community we did the best we could if we don't take, the step, all the reasonable steps that we can. And so like many of you, I had a Facebook poll, I've had emails, I've had conversations, I've chatted to people on the streets. It's polarizing. It's as many that are for it as for against it. And so it's a difficult position for us to be in, and I've struggled with it. But at the end of the day, I need to be able to say, as a community leader, that I did the best that I could. And I think of the actual impacts of this. It's for the mother who's supporting her family working retail, and that's the only income they have because her husband's been laid off work. So she's taking on that retail role. It's for the small businesses that can't afford another 14-day shutdown. I talked to a larger business owner yesterday who hires, 70 jobs. If COVID gets into his business, into his staff, it's at least a 2-week shutdown and 70 people without income during that time. So the impacts of not making a conservative choice are huge. And that's where I'm coming from on this, is that, on the risk assessment, if we're too cautious, the worst case scenario is we might have to wear masks for longer than we would like to. But the worst case scenario, if we don't do this, is somebody could actually die. And I don't know that I could look somebody in the face and say that we didn't do our best. So it's important that we look at this. I think this is a conservative metric. I think it allows for that to be, right now we're at 5. If we hit 10, which hits the provincial standards for when they're going to start watching it, it would allow us to ramp it up. So I think this is a good approach. I'm hearing from other colleagues around the region that this is the type of metric they're looking to, and I applaud the development of it. And this certainly, has my support. But at the end of the day, we have to make a conservative, pragmatic approach to how we keep our residents and our businesses safe, healthy, and prosperous. So it has my support. I'm open to looking at a timeline for a review, but I really believe this is the best way forward for Cochrane.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patton. Councillor Reid?
Yeah, I won't be repetitive, but I think, the community is obviously very concerned, interested, and divided over this. I think if most residents knew exactly what was being proposed and had a clear picture of this bylaw as it's being presented, they may not react as they have been. I think the bylaw is reasonable, responsible, and balanced as a whole. I too think that for the common good supersedes the kind of liberal liberties. And I also believe that a society or even a community, a great effective community is as good as it is in taking care of its weakest links. And I think we have many people who are vulnerable to this. And so I think we have, if not a political, but certainly a moral responsibility in terms of being able to steward this. So I have 3 questions. One is, maybe I'll give them all, and Stacey, you can respond to them. My first question is, how did the administration come up with the en-masse number? I think I know the answer, but I think everybody else would like to hear that. The second question is, Stacey, is how does this bylaw differ from those in Calgary, Airdrie, Okotoks, and Lethbridge? Again, you may or may not know that, but I'd be curious to know what research we did. And the third question is, what input, and I may have this wrong, is it, Jeff, is it EOC? Is that the emergency? ECC. What input has that committee had in relation to this bylaw? Those are my 3 initial questions, please.
For sure. So with respect to the first one around how did we come up with the numbers, when looking at the opportunity to consider what was becoming a very polarizing discussion regionally, and understanding that we were going to be facing the opportunity for council to consider whether or not there was a desire to go to a mandatory face mask. Throughout the entire response to COVID-19, both administration and the Emergency Coordination Centre have taken an approach of being measured and thoughtful. And so I decided that I was going to look through all of the provincial guidance and try and come up with something that that made sense, for Cochrane. And so when we look at the relaunch strategy and their open watch and enhanced metrics that they are using, and whether or not they think that additional measures are required in a community, it made sense to me that we look at what those numbers actually mean. Now their numbers are based on per 100,000, so there was a calculation done for what that would actually convert to on a per capita basis. And then that was that 15 number, with that watch being at minimum of 10 and over 15. So I proposed the conservative number of 10 because Cochrane has also not seen double digits throughout the pandemic to date. We have been blessed with the fact that our residents have been doing the right thing and have been taking the right measures. So 10 to me felt like an appropriate trigger based on those metrics and then what we've experienced to date in Cochrane. As far as how we differ from Calgary, Okotoks, and Lethbridge, I did actually have a look at a lot of the communities in the region. Calgary's bylaw is effective as of August 1st. The main difference with Calgary is that it is implemented immediately. The mandate is immediately required, and their exception is for children under the age of 2. When speaking about this through the ECC, which kind of touches on your third question, but I will speak to that specifically, we had a conversation around what would be appropriate and what would be easily accomplished by parents when dealing with children. And school-age children seem to be an appropriate threshold, which is why the under the age of 5. Okotoks, at the time that I did the research, had not mandated the requirement for mandatory masks at this time. They have not put into place a bylaw. Lethbridge, they followed very similarly to Edmonton, where it applies to all indoor public spaces and their public transit. I did also look at Chestermere, Red Deer, Leduc, Banff, Canmore, and Edmonton, just to see. And of course, there's a varying degree of application and or councils in the process of waiting for their administration to come before them to present what they believe is the appropriate steps for their community. So I do have that information if that's something that council is wanting me to run through. As far as input from the ECC, as the Director of Emergency Management, myself and the 2 directors, as well as the section heads that have been looking at all of our reintegration and reopening plans, met and talked through what was happening in the region, the increase in the numbers that we were seeing, and the need to ensure that we were aligning with what our objectives were in our relaunch strategy, which was to ensure that we were doing the things necessary to keep our community and citizens safe, as well as our staff, and to ensure that we were doing the things necessary to continue to make positive impact on the number of cases, as well as being prepared. And so that's where the more measurable approach has been taken, as opposed to a blanket mandatory, in that this is about making sure we have the legislation so that we can respond and be prepared to respond in the event we see numbers increasing. So I hope that answers your questions, but if I've missed anything, please let me know.
Yeah, so I understood that Airdrie and Okotoks had deferred or defeated their decisions, but I don't know that they actually had the kind of measured approach that you speak of, which I think is really commendable and certainly differentiates us from any other community that I kind of have read about and that you can trust the newspaper. So thank you. Those are my initial questions. I appreciate the response.
I would clarify that Airdrie, actually, when they debated it yesterday, the presentation that they received was similar, actually. Interestingly, they did link it back to the provincial relaunch statuses. They, however, are preparing a bylaw to come back for council consideration that's going to be based on enhanced status, which means if the province says the numbers are at a place where there's enhanced measures that are absolutely needed, then that's when they will trigger their mandatory sign or mask wearing.
Thanks for the clarification.
But just to follow up on that, Ms. Lowe, the enhanced is different than the measure that you're proposing in our bylaw. So the enhanced for Cochrane would be 15 cases. Am I correct in that?
So So the enhanced status, as I'm madly flipping to my information, enhanced status based on the province is, watch is the last, so they have open, which is less than 50 active cases per 100,000. Watch is at least 10 active cases and more than 50 per 100,000. So in Cochrane, it would be at least 10, more than 15 is where the province would flag Cochrane as a watch. Enhanced, they have not put numbers. They have said that it is where risk levels clearly require an enhanced public health measure to control the spread, and that's informed by local context, and that's where Alberta Health will step in and say, here are the measures that need to be put in place for your community.
So the bylaw that the Airdrie Council is asking their administration to come back with is based on the enhanced?
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear, that's the difference between what they're talking about and what we're discussing today.
Correct. There's no number that necessarily would trigger their bylaw. It would be Alberta Health stepping in and saying, you are now flagged as enhanced status.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Reid, are that all your comments at this time? Yeah, okay. Councillor Federico?
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to, first of all, commend staff for bringing this forward and doing all the legwork. I realize that this is a very difficult decision, and one that I agree with Councillor McFadden, I don't feel is fair to be placed on a local municipal government to try to make this decision. I do have a number of questions, first of all. When it comes to the signage with the homemade masks, you know, the big debate that I've heard a lot of people say is that are they safe? You know, people touch them all the time. Are they being cleaned? I guess maybe I question why we're using a graphic with a homemade mask as opposed to maybe more of a disposable mask or something along that line. But that's question number one, and I'm just going to fire through all of them if you don't mind. And secondly, you know, if we're going to obviously bring this into effect for businesses, is there a cost offset that the town council will look at bringing in to help businesses? You know, from certain businesses that I've chatted with, having disposable masks within their business so that people are healthy and safe is a massive cost to private businesses right now that are already struggling within our community. Also, you know, is there an opportunity maybe to bring in an actual medical professional, you know, at some point to give their feedback as to whether or not, you know, even if this gets passed today, something that we could look at and bringing in a medical professional, even if it's just to provide more knowledge to our own community members, because I agree with Councillor McFadden, this is a very polarized issue. With 10 being kind of at the watch point, I guess maybe I would throw it back to council just for discussion right now. Perhaps at 10, there could be a massive education program that goes out and keep it to where we reach 15 in order to mandate masks, rather than, you know, automatically mandating them at 10. So, you know, that way, when we reach 10, people are on high alert. You know what? We need to change some behaviors, and maybe possibly at 15 at that number, because that's obviously the number that the provincial government has obviously come forward with, that is when mandatory comes in. Next question I have, do we have enough municipal enforcement officers to be able to actually enforce this properly? That's another question. People don't want to pay more for taxes. I don't believe that we're going to have enough people to be able to properly enforce this. So what does that look like? And lastly, about Councillor Nagel's amendment, you know, right in the bylaw does come the option that council can rescind this at any point. It is actually stated in there. So I don't know why we would be making an amendment to have a hard stop, because that is fluid to me. So anyways, those are my questions for now, and I look forward to the answers.
Okay, so I think I have them all. I believe I have them all jotted down. Excuse me. So the pictures that are on the sign, certainly the one on the far right with the person with the ponytail and toque, that was intended to be depicting a disposable mask. It's difficult when you're using cartoon characters to necessarily get that correct. As far as us promoting the use of homemade masks, I think we've heard through Alberta Health Services, and that where we have continually aligned, where they are saying face coverings, and face coverings can include a scarf, a handkerchief, a homemade mask, and so we are following in line with that. As far as disposable masks and the costs associated with businesses, it is certainly our hope that Cochrane continues to do the right thing and we don't hit the threshold. I think our communications team is currently doing what they can and intends to ramp that up even more, about promoting the fact that we will implement, if this bylaw is passed, a mandatory, and it's incumbent on the community to be responsible and do the things that they need to do to ensure that doesn't actually come to fruition. However, that said, the province did make multiple disposable masks available through different locations, and Cochrane has made sure that we have those available on our local transit as well as at locations throughout the community. So if businesses were really struggling, we would obviously work with them, but there's not any formal program in place at this time. I would think that that could also be something that maybe if council does implement this, and we're seeing that we are having to implement it, and we are seeing that there is a demand on businesses, that maybe the Economic Recovery Task Force could look at a program or something to that nature. But it's certainly not something that's off the table and something that we're very aware of, and making sure that we have them available for people who quite simply can't afford them. There are individuals who, through COVID, have definitely suffered some economic impact with losses of job and work. So we know that's a reality for a lot of people. So our facilities throughout the community do have disposable masks to be able to share. The opportunity to bring in a medical professional for as far as to continue to provide knowledge to the community, I think that's definitely something that we can look at through the Provincial Operations Centre and Alberta Health, whether or not we can run a bit of an education session with the community. I know they are taxed right now just simply in response, but as we continue to go through COVID-19, what that looks like as we transition, there definitely are probably going to be opportunities to be able to do that and to be able to do something virtually where we can have that information. We do continue to receive from the Provincial Operating Centre updates on their FAQs, and those are continually updated on our webpage. So while not a person speaking and providing knowledge or education, that is another avenue that we've been using to ensure that we're getting public health directly from the experts advice out to our community. As far as municipal enforcement, I would say municipal enforcement is challenged as it is on a daily basis to respond to the number of calls, including the number of calls that they are getting related to COVID. We are seeing tolerance levels of people definitely drop. We do usually see an increase in summer anyway, where more people are home, children are outside playing, dogs are out longer. But again, I would reiterate that the intention of this bylaw is not enforcement. The intention is a clear message that the town of Cochrane is taking a measured, responsible approach should the numbers in our community transition to a point where we believe that mandatory masks are necessary. And they would take the approach of education first. So if they went to a business that didn't have the sign displayed, they could provide them with the sign. They could tell them where it needs to be. They will help work through those conversations, as would our business development department support through those conversations. It's not a one-stop fits everyone. We know that, and we certainly intend to continue to work with our community as we go through this. The one thing I wanted to comment on, sorry, as I recall, Councillor Federico, the comment about the bylaw having the ability for council to rescind at any time, that provision is that council could rescind the mandatory. So if implementation of the mandatory requirement was in place, council could decide that's long enough, we are reverting, without having to wait for us to report numbers under 10 for 14 consecutive days. It would not be a reversion or rescindment of the bylaw itself. So just for clarity.
And I guess I throw this back out to, council. I agree. I think I've struggled with this because I see both sides of the equation. I see the people who have commented, this is not our place to be involved. And I have to agree. I don't want it to be my place to be involved, actually. And I don't think any one of us sitting on council right now want to be involved in this decision. But I agree with Councillor McFadden in the fact that I can't imagine if somebody's grandparent died and then they turned around and they said, hey, you, Councillor Federico, you never voted for this and you're responsible for my grandfather's death. I mean, I don't want to have that on my shoulders at all. So I definitely, I like what you've come up with. I like the fact that, number one, the mayor did talk about removing Rocky View schools. I'd also like to suggest that we put that out to the Calgary Catholic School Board to deal with our Catholic school as well, district, because obviously Rocky View, having that conversation with them is only going to deal with the public side. So having that conversation with the school boards, I think, is ideal, because you know what, I don't work in the school system. They're already going to have enough challenges. So thank you for bringing that up. I like the fact that you've looked at, taking certain demographics or certain people that might struggle with this, or the fact that they can't wear masks out. I think it is going to be a little bit difficult, and the fact that how are you going to know if I'm in, a local business, how do I know that that person has a struggle with a mask? Does it all of a sudden cause friction with people within the store? I mean, how is anybody going to know what that person's medical history is? That's going to be a bit of a challenge. I still like the idea, and I don't know if there's any desire to do this, but I would like to see the number be maybe raised from 10 to 15, with 10 becoming a massive education blitz. That, you know what, Cochrane, if you don't pay attention, like, this is what is going to happen to you. And I agree, does it make any difference if it's 5 right now, and then we're promoting that now, and then it goes to 10? I don't know, it just seems that we're awfully close to 10 right now, so I don't know if there's any middle ground there. I'll wait to see what everybody says, but right now, I mean, obviously, I would vote to support something. It's just kind of figuring out where exactly that is. I think it would be irresponsible as a community leader, like Councillor McFadden said, to not do anything. So I'll wait to hear everybody's comments and go from there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fedinko. Councillor Flowers?
Thank you, Ms. Lowe, for all your work that you've put in on this. It's a very difficult thing to deal with. I know that here we are having to mix politics and science together, which none of us are happy about, and wishing that the health officials and the province would make the decision. But today we have to step up and show our leadership. The community is really divided on the mandatory use of the masks in public places. I've tried to read all the emails and things that we've had come in, and there's good arguments on both sides, but I find the arguments for wearing the masks much stronger than those that don't think we should wear them. I appreciate the way that the bylaw is written, so that if we can keep the numbers low, we won't be mandated to wear them, but if the numbers rise, then we're going to have to add this measure as another way to fight this virus. We need to protect the vulnerable people in Cochrane, even if it means giving up some of our freedoms. To date, our friends and families aren't dying, and we need to keep it that way. So we need to be responsible for each other and make sure that we look after each other. So I do support this bylaw the way it's written, and I don't think it needs an amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flowers. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I'm quite surprised to be here debating the merits of a mandatory mask bylaw at a municipal government meeting. I definitely wouldn't have guessed that we'd have to address the subject matter, as it's an Alberta health subject in my estimation. Nonetheless, as usual, I'll advocate for autonomous business decisions and personal responsibility. Mandatory mask strikes me as the thin tip of a wedge that intrudes in our hard-won personal liberty. I'd enthusiastically vote against this proposed bylaw and urge my fellow councillors to do the same. I don't think the subject should be in our municipal purview. And I'd also just recommend, based on the conversation, that there's all the difference in the world between recommended actions from the town and mandatory responses. And I would be heavily in favor of recommending masks, but not legislating them. I urge everybody to do the same. And if we can't come to that, I would support Councillor Nagel's motion of putting an expiry date on it as a second best.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor McFadden, you have another comment?
I do. Sorry, Ms. Law, question. What's the highest number of cases we've had in Cochrane? I don't have that number myself.
So throughout the pandemic, there was times when we were grouped in with Cochrane Springbank and then Cochrane. Since we've had clear numbers just for Cochrane, 6 is the highest, and that is where we're sitting as of today.
Okay. So, yeah, so I just wanted to comment. I mean, I think we should stay at the 10 because 6 is the highest. And so 10 would be essentially duplicating where we've already managed to do as a community. With this bylaw, it gives our community a target. I mean, if you want to avoid this level, then let's all work together to use all the other tools in our toolbox to keep ourselves and each other happy. So I like the numbers where it's at. And as I understand it, the purpose of following this would be a lot of public engagement and education about mask wearing and all those things. I've heard the concerns that masks don't work and people don't wear them properly, but we teach people how to drive. We can certainly teach people how to wear a mask properly. On the level of the infringements of our fundamental rights, I have a hard time going with that rhetoric. As a society, we come together and we create community rules for how we can get along. And they go from the big ones, like speed limits to seat belts, to the small ones. I mean, I think a couple of us are already hearing from people that want us to mandate parking outside the front of their homes. So as a community, we find different ways to put rules on ourselves so that we can all get along. And this is just another one of those. It's not going to stop anybody from arguing with us and debating with us and voting. It's just another way that we can keep each other healthy and be responsible and look after ourselves. And with the target at 10, it allows everybody to continue being responsible in your own way right now. And you have your own rights right now to continue to decide how you want to be part of the community and in being responsible that we don't hit that target. So I like where we're at. In response to Councillor Nagel's idea of kind of putting a time limit on it, I don't know how to put a time limit on it, but maybe we could amend it so that council will review this in January. That would give us, would be kind of how I would support that. So I think those are probably my final thoughts on this topic.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McFadden. Councillor Nagel, another comment?
Mayor, I think we have lost Councillor Fedeko. There she is again. My apologies.
Yeah.
I can wait till Councillor Fedego's logged back in.
No, we're good. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So I've been clear in all of my communication in the public, but I haven't mentioned it in this meeting. Like, I want to be clear. Like, I support people taking steps to reduce the spread of COVID-19, especially in indoor areas where it's crowded. My primary concern in all of this is creating an entirely new layer of government authority, where the government can say, you have to do X, Y, Z to run your business. You have to do X, Y, Z to go out in public. And then this poster policy is a whole new thing where now I've never heard of anywhere in Canada requiring a private business to advertise the government's sitting policies for them. So that's a whole new policy. And I feel I understand you guys are going to pass this without me, but I feel very, very strongly about the timeline of this bylaw. And please, if you don't even think December 31st is long enough, bump it up 6 months. Make it June 30th, 2021, so that this thing just goes away at some point. And if that's not worth it, let's do September 2021, right before the next government comes in and takes over. And I know you're saying, council can come back in and change it at any point in time, but I'm pretty sure if we don't put a timeline on this, you guys are never going to support repealing it. And when I do bring it up summer next year, people are going to say, I think this is a waste of our time. We have bigger things to worry about. I've seen that with other bylaws. Something as simple as the carburetor ban that nobody even supports. People didn't even want to debate that in council because it was, quote, a waste of time. And that's exactly what's going to happen to this bylaw if we just create it. We're going to have a permanent rule in place where the municipal government has the authority to just create mask requirements and poster requirements without the town of Cochrane, or without the town council. And what will end up happening in, say, 3-4 years, there's going to be COVID-20 or another H1N1 type sickness, and the municipal government's going to say, well, we already figured this out a few years ago, so if you could just make this little amendment, we're going to reenact the policies that we've already set a pretty clear precedent to do. So I understand you guys are passing this. Please put some sort of deadline on it, and if there's no deadline on it, I'm not even comfortable voting in favor of unanimous consent to allow you guys to vote on third reading today.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nagel. Councillor McFadden, another question?
Yeah, sorry, just for clarification in the bylaw, it says you don't have to wear masks in a place where you have a membership. How does this apply to the Spray Lakes facility, the recreation facility?
So that facility would be a bit more complicated because people would not have to wear a mask if they are participating in a fitness activity. So while they're participating in that fitness activity, that would exempt them. The memberships, Spray Lakes, because it is a multi-use facility and you're not required to have a membership, it would be our interpretation of our bylaw that the masks would apply there if you were in common spaces where you're not actually partaking. And that section is also specifically to ensure that schools were not, whether private or otherwise, were exempted from the bylaw. That's consistent with the wording that was used by the City of Calgary.
Okay, and then another question. So, like, this authorizes the action to be through the ECC, so, which is fine, and the ECC itself is meant to be a temporary measure to get us through this crisis. So, at one point, so when the ECC, when council makes that decision to fold up the ECC, would that then fold up this, or how would that interact?
So it doesn't require the approval of the ECC. It requires the approval of the Director of Emergency Management, which is a position that I have through appointment. That position remains in place whether the ECC is activated or not. And the ECC is deactivated based on the decision of the ECC at that time. It's not a decision that comes back to council. So the bylaw will essentially remain in effect until such time as council either rescinds it and or if council determines that they wish to amend the bylaw in accordance with what Councillor Nagel has put forward, then it would say at the end of the bylaw that the bylaw comes into full force and effect upon the date of third and final reading and would cease to be in effect as of December 31st, 2020.
Okay, I think I would support that we amend the decision so that council does a review of the bylaw February 1st of 2021. Give us 6 months to kind of get through this and the start of winter and the havoc of kids back to school and the Christmas season to get a good chance to review it. So that's, I know there's an amendment on the floor, but that would be my alternate amendment, was that this would come back to council for review for February 1st.
Okay, we will deal with Councillor Nagel's amendment and then move forward after that as far as dates go. Councillor Fedeko, you have a comment?
Yeah, can you guys hear me? I kind of froze up there and couldn't move anywhere. This might be a question for you, Mayor. Do you know why Airdrie and Okotoks looked at deferring? I mean, are they kind of sitting at the mindset that perhaps the province might mandate something and so they're kind of trying to push it off so that it comes to a provincial decision?
No, the province has been pretty clear that they are not going to step into this arena. I believe both of those councils, I talked to Mayor Brown from Airdrie last night after their meeting. They had not, their administration was not as prepared as ours. I guess they didn't have a bylaw to debate. They have sent away their team to discuss everything that they, or to craft a bylaw based on everything they discussed yesterday at their meeting. We're kind of a little bit ahead of them, having a proposed bylaw to debate today. So I believe it's just a matter of time. They're going to be back and making a similar decision to what we're doing today. Okotoks, I believe, deferred to August to come back and revisit altogether.
Yeah, and if I could help with the Airdrie, it was actually a resolution directing staff to prepare that bylaw and bring it back based on mandated face masks at the time that they were categorized by the province as enhanced status, and it is coming back to their council on August 17th.
Okay, and I just want to say thank you, Ms. Lowe, for the information. Number one, on looking at in a medical professional, when we can, how we can. I think that is an important step that this council should take on. Obviously, it's not going to make up part of the bylaw, but I think it's valuable that we get that information out to the community, that we aren't basing that on, sitting around all council, talking to our friends or posting some Facebook polls that, all of a sudden we're all medical doctors and we're gonna be giving our opinion. I like the fact that it would come from a professional. I also like the fact that you made openly clear that we will help businesses if we can, in whatever way we can, to not put an additional cost on them to have masks. I do support Councillor Nagel's comment about, I guess having a penalty if a business doesn't want to put up a sign. I don't want to see, I would definitely want every business to have the sign. I personally don't agree with now, slapping on a $200 fine if they're not compliant. I think God, our business community are hurting. I don't want to see us go down that road. I think it's all education, positive. I don't want to see an enforcement issue with that. And I would support Councillor McFadden's amendments about bringing this back February 1st, I believe she said, or whatever it was, or the end, to revise, to take a look at what's going on in our community. Obviously, if there's no support of raising the number, that's fine. But I see both sides of it. So I guess that's where I'm at.
If I could, just to provide a little bit of clarity around the signage. The intent of the signage for local businesses is so that people are aware that the mandatory mask for an indoor space has actually now been implemented and is a requirement. And it follows in line with what Calgary and other communities have done as far as once it's mandatory, we will sign the places where it's actually required. So that's where the individual businesses come into play. And again, I just want to assure council that the intention is not to come out hard and fast with enforcement. The intent is to educate. So I can see an enforcement action maybe occurring if a business was completely disregarding the implementation of the mandatory and potentially encouraging something different. But as I said, it's a difficult, it will be a difficult bylaw to enforce. Enforcement is there as a last measure, simply because we can't require people to provide medical information, and we will work with businesses to make sure that they are encouraging people to wear masks when they're indoor and to reduce the opportunity for conflict. So having that signage at the entryway where someone can see it when they walk in ensures that everyone is aware of the expectation.
I guess, my only comment would be if we are looking at fining a business, perhaps municipal enforcement could let council know which business that is, and just so that we can be aware, and maybe there's a conversation that needs to be had. I really don't want to go down the road of slapping on a penalty if we don't have, and I do hear what you're saying, it is about education, but things happen and all of a sudden, there's 50 complaints against a certain business. Does it become a bit of a witch hunt? I don't know. So I just want to make sure that council's maybe made aware of what that situation is and which business we're talking about.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Federico. Councillor Nagel, another comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be talking so much, but this is obviously a very important issue. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, you bet.
Okay,
no
perfect.
need to apologize.
Yeah.
We take all day if we need to.
Yeah, and it's just, so I'll try and be quick, but I put this Facebook poll out, and 56 or 5,700 people voted, and honestly, I don't think all those people are from Cochrane. My post got shared all over the place, but it's at 53% of people opposed to the mandatory mask, and 47% of people who are in favor of it. You can skew those numbers all over the place, but even if you plus or minus 20%, there's still a significant portion of the public that are concerned about this. And one of the primary concerns is that we are setting a precedent and a new normal that is going to last for a very long time. And if you guys would just agree to a term limit on this, again, it could be 12 months, it could be 18 months, I don't care. You would take 50% of the steam out of the opposition. You would just acknowledge their concerns and say, look, this is temporary. It is to save lives. When COVID is gone, it'll be gone. And then that gives you an easy way to respond to the opponent. Say, look, this isn't forever. It will end. And then if you guys just oppose this term limit that I'm putting on it, you're going to dump fuel on the fire of people who are ticked that the government is setting crazy new precedents. And I think from your own political standpoint, I think it makes great sense to even put a 12 or 18 month just hard. It's over at this point in time. But I've said I think all I can say. I don't think I'm going to be able to convince you guys with any other comments.
Councillor Nagel, I think your point is being heard. Would you accept as a friendly amendment, and I'm hearing that in your voice, Councillor McFadden and Councillor Federico have both agreed that a term to revisit this in February. Is that acceptable to you, a friendly amendment, or are you looking for that hard deadline for it to stop?
There's a middle ground between the middle ground where it by default ends with the option to renew upon review. So failing an affirmative approval from council, it would end, if that makes sense. That I would accept.
And would you accept the February
Sure.
date?
Like I said, it could be September, for like September 2021, for all I care.
Well,
I don't want it to be forever.
That's what I'm hearing from you, is that it's not so much the date, it's you want to see a finite timeline put on
Yes.
this.
And it will end by default, but council will have the option to review it again and renew at that time. And I think that's going to give you guys a huge leg up when you're talking to people who are upset about this. I honestly do.
So you would accept that as a friendly amendment to February 1st?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that saves us a little bit of procedural jockeying later on. So that was for my benefit there, thank you. Councilor McFadden, another comment?
Yeah, so just on the signage requirement, I think it's more of a positive than a negative. It allows businesses to demonstrate that, it's been required, it's a municipal requirement. So they can either say it's because of the municipality or they can blame us, but it does show where the buck stops. The requirement to display, we do that all the time. You have to show your business license. If you're a restaurant, you have to show your occupancy and your health. We require businesses to show business proofs all the time. So it's not a huge, again, infringement or anything new. It's just an evolution as we adapt to, unique times, and hopefully we never see these again. But no, I'm okay with that. I think it's fine. And overall, the approach is educate and not to go through an enforcement side, which I think is fine. So so on that, that's my point on that. If we wanted to amend it with this to end for February 1st and council to review renewing the bylaw, however you want to word that, for February 1st, I'm in support of that as well. I think it'll allow us to have 6 months of an experience as a community to see what works. So.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Federico?
I too would support Councillor Nagel's amendment. The one question I do have is what if, and this might be a question for Councillor Nagel, what happens if we are sitting at obviously 12 cases at that point and it's mandatory masks everywhere? The province has definitely kept the numbers kind of the same at that, 15 mark. I mean, does that become something that then it goes from a hard stop, so it's not stopping, so everybody's not wearing masks anymore, to more of a revision, if you kind of get what I'm saying, right? Like if we're already there, because we might never reach this. I mean, let's keep in mind, masks might not be mandatory in Cochrane ever if our numbers remain low, right? But what if they are high, they creep up, and now, sitting at February 1st, we're sitting at 20 cases of COVID in Cochrane. Then are we hard stopping it, or are we revising it? That's where I think, and I can understand your point, Councillor Nagel, that once things are passed, they become law, it seems, and they never seem to go away. But yet, in this kind of case, it seems that would be more of a revision of looking at it. So I'm not sure which way you want to go on that one, but I do agree with you that I don't want to see this hanging around forever if we have to.
I might be able to provide some support in that direction. If the decision is made to amend the bylaw to have it cease to be in effect as of February 1st, 2021, administration would be tasked with bringing it back to council. If we were still sitting in a time when a pandemic was still of significant concern, we would, as the emergency management people, would be bringing that back for council to consider probably at one of the meetings, if not the last meeting in January. So that would be incumbent on administration to ensure that review would occur.
Okay, perfect. With that being said, I can definitely support Councillor Nagel's amendment as it stands with the February 1st deadline.
Councillor Nagel, do you still wish to respond?
Sure, quickly. Stacey's response is fine, but what I was also thinking is because this bylaw gives administration the authority to implement a policy which automatically is rescinded after 14 days of not being in effect, I would say that how it would work, I would think, is that, if we move into that ban prior to the bylaw expiring, and then the bylaw expires, we would just stay in a mask ban until we fall back below 10 cases. And then even if we go back up to 11, administration would no longer have the authority to implement the ban a second time. I think that's how it would work, but...
Unfortunately, if the bylaw ceases to be in effect, we thereby lose the authority to enforce that bylaw. So any mandatory mask wearing at the time that the bylaw would cease would also cease at that time.
Okay. Mrs. Lowe's response is fine.
Yeah, and the way I'm taking your amendment is review and renew. So we could go either way at that point. We could say, no, it's over, let's just let it go. Or we could adjust and have a new report from administration outlining everything we've gone through over the past 6 months and just judge accordingly and make the decision at the time.
Yes, and absent an affirmative decision from council to renew the bylaw would no longer be effective. This
Yes.
is my amendment. Yes, okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Flowers, and eventually I'm going to wait in here.
I'm just curious, Ms. Lowe, how much notice will the businesses get if the numbers go up and we have to implement the bylaw?
So we would immediately initiate a communication strategy out to the entire community and specifically, obviously, ensure that the businesses are targeted. And we would provide a grace period. Like I said, the intent is not to come out hard and strong and say and enforce right away. There would be that transition, no different than when the province actually issued the order to say that businesses had to close and then gave our enforcement officers the authority to enforce those. They were going around to the businesses and educating them, saying, hey, you may not be aware, but you're actually not allowed to be open right now. And so it would be that type of implementation. And like I said, a significant amount of communication out to the community so that they're aware that it is now in place.
Thank you. And I do like the idea of reviewing in 6 months when we get past the school openings and the Christmas shopping and everything that goes along with it. Seems like a common sense time to be reviewing everything. And one final note is that the Social Recovery Task Force is looking at putting together a series of information sessions. So if there's education that we can do, they'd love to help out with that along the way. Thank you.
Yeah, great point, Councillor Flowers. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I appreciate Councillor Nagel's reference to the survey and you know, how those results came out. And I'm in support of the intent of what he's trying to achieve. I guess for me, the review, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be renewed. It might be a review that we might want to change those numbers. So I think that's a good time, and I'm in fully support of that February 1st for the very reasons that the other members of council have identified.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Wilson, another comment?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify my position that I am unequivocally opposed to this bylaw. I think this is a terrible direction to be taking, and I beseech you not to do this. However, the communication pieces that we've come up with our communication team about the recommendations of wearing masks, about the benefits of them, I'm completely fine with that, and I think they should be put out into the community. It's all the difference in the world between mandating this and recommending it. I strongly recommend we don't mandate this. This is the wrong direction to take. However, I do appreciate the media that's been done, and I think we should go ahead with the recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. I don't see any more comments in the queue, so I'll take this opportunity to jump in. I had intended to a lot sooner, but obviously you guys have a lot to comment on this. As everybody's pointed out, very polarizing, divisive issue, not just in Cochrane, across the country, across the globe, as we all find a way to navigate these uncertain times. And I think that's where my position lies. It's that uncertainty. The uncertainty which brings fear, and that is what is really driving a lot of the comments that I've been receiving from a lot of residents. And I hear you. It's and again, I want to thank all of the people that reached out to all of us throughout this, weighing in with your thoughts. Everybody's family situation, everybody's business situation is unique. We've all got our story behind the scenes of how we're navigating COVID-19. But at the end of the day, we need to find a position that basically is steeped in exactly what we have been following all along, and that is the direction of AHS, the province. I've heard from many of you, and I don't disagree, that maybe this would have been better handled in the provincial decision-making hands. However, given the fact that they are mandating or passing that responsibility to us to react in our own way, I do appreciate where this bylaw is coming from, because we're actually going back and using AHS guidelines to put this bylaw and these provisions in place. So we're actually not deviating from any of the path that we have taken to get us to here. And I'm very proud of the fact of how Cochrane has risen to this occasion. We have, staved off COVID-19 for the most part. We're not immune to it, obviously, but all along we have been reacting in a very, positive approach and following guidelines, washing hands, physical distancing, all of the jargon that we're all used to now, that we never want to hear ever again after this. But the fact that Calgary, Brooks, High River, other areas that are quite close to us have been significantly more impacted by this with a large number of cases. And we have yet to see that surge. And while we have, had an increase of 1 over our maximum throughout this, that trend is not something that we want to see continue, obviously, but I don't think that the numbers that we're seeing now give us the green light to go ahead and mandate masks today. So I'm really happy with kind of the middle ground that we're falling into. So again, basing our decision-making on the science rather than pressure, which I understand, and that gets back to the fear and the uncertainty. So really, I think, Councillor Fedayko, I heard you talk about education. My thoughts on that are that I believe that we should start the education program now. I don't think we wait. That's what I'm hearing administration is about to embark on, is that education campaign around wearing a mask. And I completely agree, Councillor Wilson. That is something we need to do a great job of, and we need to do it immediately. We shouldn't wait. We should be doing that this afternoon and get that message out that while inconvenient, a mask is an increased barrier from transmitting the disease. So anything we can do to share that message, I think we need to do. That, in a sense, is where my next comment comes from, and that is all of us as senior leadership team, as council. I believe it's our duty from this day forward to be wearing a mask where we can and showing that leadership wherever we land today. Whatever side of this decision you are on, I think it's incumbent on all of us to be showing Cochranites and residents and business owners alike that we believe that masks are something that can help save lives and that we are willing to wear them ourselves. I agree, it is a little bit cumbersome, it's annoying, it's hot, it's not comfortable, and it's out of the sheer vanity of it all. I think that's where some of this lies, is that it's just not something we want to do. I've been forcing myself to wear one where I can, where I should say, out in public, and as you wear one, you start to get used to it. But I agree, Councillor Nagel, we do need to have an end date on this. For all the reasons that everybody has pointed out already, I'm glad that we're kind of finding consensus around that end date where we can review, renew, repurpose this bylaw if need be. Hopefully this is well behind us at that point. Again, for me, it's this bylaw finds a way where we can go back to our community and say, it's upon all of us now to step up our measures, continue to act and react the way we have all along, and keep the numbers low so that we as a community do not have to mandate masks. So I like the flexibility that this allows. And the last bit, I guess, is around the responsibility. I agree that it is our responsibility. It's not something that any of us ran for council to sit around this table, albeit virtually today, to make decisions that keep our community's well-being from a virus at bay. But here we are. You don't get to pick the issues pick you. So here we are. But the last message that I would like to convey is around the be kind, assume the best in each other and care for one another as a community. Seeing great feats and acts of that throughout the community throughout this. But as a few of you have mentioned, there's been and I get it, this pandemic has eroded people's fuses. It has eroded our ability to see good in some where we take things for granted and maybe have a shorter fuse than what we need to be having with one another. And I don't mean us as council, I mean the whole planet. Like, it's everywhere. Everybody is quick to judge, quick to react, and quick to respond in a negative way. And I think we just all need to take a breath. We'll get through this together. That's that hashtag we've been promoting throughout this, Cochrane Together. And we are in this together, no matter if the masks do become mandated. So we'll get through this. We'll continue to be Cochrane strong and find our way that only Cochrane can. So the last thing I forgot to talk about was the posters. I agree. While it's something that is spreading the education, I don't agree with mandating them in businesses. I don't know if there's an appetite on council to talk about that a little bit more. I like the February 1st, but I do think the posters is, while I get the intent, if we're not going to enforce so much, then what's the purpose? I mean, I think it's no different than right now. I would like to encourage all those businesses to put up a poster that says, I encourage you to wear a mask. But they've already have the authority in their own premise to enact their own personal bylaw for their business and have masks worn. I know in my own business, our staff are choosing to wear masks, and a couple of the staff really showed some leadership there. I'm humbled by the small acts of individuals that have risen in all of this, and that staff person was one of them, showing leadership in a time when it's sometimes you're being judged by your peers, and instead we should be celebrating those individuals. So I don't know if there's any more discussion to be had by any of you around the poster. I would just like to wipe that and encourage that as well, and keep it everything else as written. And that's my big long rant. And yes, Councillor Nagel, we will vote on your amendment before we move into the main motion. Councillor Badeko, you have a comment now?
I would support thoughts, Mayor Janot, on not, but I think that, but businesses are encouraged. It's going to be kind of, I guess, law around town anyways. I don't want to have to enforce this or force them. I think that it's just, like you said, let's encourage them to hang up the sign. But again, anything that we can take that pressure off of businesses by kind of layering another form of, legislation on them, I want to stay out of. So I would agree with that. Councillor Wilson, when you did say about, I guess just talking about, we shouldn't be involved in this. Unfortunately, our neighbors kind of force this upon us, right? Because I think if we don't do something, you have to remember that all those places that have mandated masks and if we don't, they're now coming out to our community, right? Because you're going to have those 50% of angry people who are going to say, wow, I'm just going to go to Cochrane, just like people have threatened on us. If we mandate them, they're going to go out to Sundry, right? So, I mean, there does become a domino effect there. What I was wondering about, so when COVID first started, we had those big community signs, right, that said, stay home, whatever, those big signs that were kind of everywhere. I would suggest that we look at bringing those back, obviously, especially if we're in a mandated situation. I was in Canmore over the weekend. And so what I kind of wonder about is about the tourism, right? So if I'm a tourist, I'm coming into Cochrane, I might not know that there's mandated masks. So, I mean, can we get that message out, whether or not, you can pick up free masks at our tourist center or whatever, or each business has a certain amount of masks that they would give people? Because if you're not from here, you might not even know that we have a mandate on masks. So how are we going to communicate that out to visitors or people coming into our community? And like I said, I would like to see those big billboard signs come back out so that everybody knows. That might alleviate having businesses have to hang up a sign as well. But just that extra level of communication out there.
So if I could, the signs are actually still out, Councillor Federico. They are indicating to the community that there are still public health orders in effect. We changed those from saying public health emergency in effect to public health orders in effect. And absolutely, we would look at repurposing those yet again if we were in a situation where we were implementing mandatory face masks, and ensure that those are located throughout the community in places where visitors and people coming into the community would see them. They are on the most highly traveled routes currently. And then the visitor center is, they are equipped with disposable face masks now. And as I said, we would ensure that masks were available throughout the community for those that were not able to provide them for themselves.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to weigh in on? No? So nobody wants to, Councillor Federico, you agree with me on the sign piece? Everyone else is thinking keep it as is? Councillor Nagel, go ahead.
Oh, I definitely think we should relax the sign restrictions on businesses, but I think we should just maybe get the one amendment out of the way and then move on to the second one. I don't know if Councillor Federico wants to move the next amendment, or I will if nobody else wants to.
Okay, that's a good point. Let's vote on the amendment, and just to be clear, the amendment, maybe Ms. Lowe, can you repeat back what you understand the amendment to be, so that we're all on the same page here?
So the amendment put forward by Councillor Nagel would be that in the section where it indicates that the bylaw comes into full force and effect upon the date of third and final reading, that the bylaw shall cease to be in effect as of February 1st, 2020. The understanding is, and we will put a statement in the bylaw, that administration will bring the bylaw forward for council's consideration ahead of that date.
Okay, and that should be 2021.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, everybody's clear on the amendment? So I'll call the question. All those in favor of the amendment? Those opposed? There's none. It carries unanimously. Thank you. I see a couple of comments now. Councillor Reid, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I like the comments that have been made, although I'm not close to it, about the businesses, both from the mayor and Councillor Federico, and so I'd be in support of that amendment if he were to make it.
Okay.
I agree with that amendment.
Okay, I'll just, we have Councillor Flowers next, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Federico, for a potential amendment.
I too agree that we should not make the businesses put up the signs. I think they'll appreciate the support and our participation, but it shouldn't be mandatory.
Okay. Councillor Federico?
So yes, I'd just like to bring forward the amendment that while we will encourage businesses to obviously hang a sign if mandatory masks are in effect, we will not be enforcing this on any of our businesses here in town. That the suggestion will be to encourage and educate, but not to force and regulate.
Okay, so that amendment is now on the floor. Ms. Lowe, would you have a recommendation of what part of the bylaw?
Yeah, so procedurally, the amendment should be that bylaw 2020 be amended to remove section 5 signage and amend schedule B accordingly.
Okay. You agree with that, Councillor Federico? Okay. Any discussion on the amendment? Not seeing any, we'll call the question. All those in favor of the amendment? Those opposed? Is carried. Thank you. Councillor Wilson, you have a question?
Sorry, it's slow on unmuting here. I just had a question about the vote at the end here. Do I understand that this requires unanimous consent to be moved today? Is that correct, Ms. Lowe?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to know as we get to the voting part here. And if it wasn't to get unanimous consent, then it would come back in September at our next meeting for review. Is that the consequences of not getting unanimous consent?
Unless the mayor decided to call a special meeting, which he can do with less than 24 hours notice, and then it would come back to another special council meeting shortly hereafter.
Okay, I'm not looking to make more work, but I think we're doing the wrong thing, and I feel so strongly about it that I'll be voting against unanimous consent, whatever, if that is the consequence. I just wanted to make sure that I understood what I was getting into.
Okay. No, thank you for that, Councillor Wilson. This is a difficult one, I understand. And that's the system. We're just working the system here. So the next step here will be to call the question on second reading. We will vote on that. And then ask for unanimous consent, as Ms. Lowe has said. If we don't get that, then we shall move on, and we'll discuss that as it comes to bear. So, okay, any other comments on the motion? So we have amended it to have a finite timeline of February, where we will renew and review potentially. And we have taken out the sign, the mandatory sign, and it is a recommended action at this time. Otherwise, as we're reading it, this will grant administration the ability to enact a mandatory mask in Cochrane should the cases reach 10, based on the science that has been presented today, and then rescind if those cases were to drop below 10 for consecutive 14 days. And that's how, that's what's in front of us at the moment. So any final comments before I call the question? Not seeing any. So all those in favor of Bylaw 2020, please indicate. Those opposed? That carries 5-2. We'll move on to unanimous consent. So all those in favor of providing unanimous consent to proceed to third and final reading of Bylaw 2020. Call the question. Please indicate. Those opposed? That motion, I believe, fails. It passes with the amount of votes, but we do not have unanimous consent. So we will not be moving to third and final reading today. Ms. Lowe, so just to reiterate the next steps, I can call a special meeting and we can come back with this bylaw, or we can wait until September for our next scheduled council meeting.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Councillor Nagel, you have a question?
I wanted to comment on the unanimous consent thing, and then you just called the vote and gave me no choice but how to vote. Yeah, I was going to try and have a discussion about it, but now that it's already gone one way, we may as well move on and organize another meeting.
Okay, I'm sorry I didn't get your comment there.
For clarity, Mayor, just on my previous comment, any member of council can currently also put forward a motion to call a special meeting.
Okay. Councillor Wilson, you have a comment?
I just quickly wanted to apologize to the group. I'm not looking to make work, and I usually don't do this. I just feel so strongly about the subject that we're doing the wrong thing that I had to oppose it out of conscience, but I try to always find middle ground, and I apologize for having to do that.
No, hey, like I said, we're all just following our instincts here, so there's no wrong answer. I'm sure we'll hear from many that disagree or agree with the direction we're taking today. Councillor Federico, you have a comment?
On the next go around, do we have to have unanimous consent again, or
No.
third vote then?
No, next time would be just third and final reading.
Okay, I mean, I I get the whole point of delaying it, but obviously by vote, it's going to go through at some point. I think it's just a matter of time. I mean, maybe we wait till our neighboring communities like Airdrie and Okotoks are coming back. I think they're coming back in mid-August. Maybe that's kind of a good opportunity to look at this. I don't know if necessarily waiting to September is the best answer either. So I guess we'll leave that with somebody in the crowd.
Yeah, we need, Ms. Lowe, we need to provide 24 hours notice, correct?
24 hours notice is needed unless, of course, there's less than 24 hours when the mayor calls a special meeting. So the mayor can waive the 24-hour notice period.
Okay, we're really challenging our procedural bylaws today. Okay, Councilor McFadden, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, I'd like to put a motion on the floor then that we advance a special meeting for 24 hours from now, or the most earliest time that we could do this, to call the third reading on this.
Okay, I'm going to look to Ms. Lowe for a little bit of guidance. That 24 hours would be from now, so noon tomorrow. Would that be how you read that?
That would be correct. That would allow administration to provide the 24-hour notice, ensure that it is posted on social media and at the ranch house as required.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion? No? Councillor, if we could just use the mics, Councillor Flowers, not everybody in the public can see our...
I was just wondering if we could wait till Friday, as I have 2 meetings booked for tomorrow.
Okay, this is always the challenge with 7 calendars. Councillor Badeko?
Friday is a terrible day for me, so I mean, I would be looking at maybe tomorrow if we could do it later in the afternoon or something, might be a little bit easier than just right at noon, but that would be my preference.
Later in the afternoon would be better.
Yeah, Friday's impossible. Yeah, later in the afternoon. I just want to, let's advance this.
Councillor Nagel? There you are.
Sorry, got slow computer issues. So procedurally, Stacey, you said the mayor can just waive the 24-hour period. Like, does that mean procedurally we could do it in like 30 minutes or 60 minutes?
Like 30 minutes from now or 60
Well,
minutes from now?
your mic is muted.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Councillor Nagel, are you asking if you could just come back to another special meeting in 30 or 60 minutes from now?
Yes.
Certainly, council could choose to do that, to adjourn this meeting and call a special meeting. That would not allow us to post a separate agenda. So you'd be holding a special meeting without an agenda, but ultimately it's a one issue item that you'd be coming forward with. So if that is the will of council, then you can absolutely do that.
Yeah, and if I could just explain my vote, I wasn't going to vote to jam it up. I came here today saying that if council would compromise and set a deadline on it, then I would support unanimous consent. And I was going to get into all that before the question got called. But then the question just got called, and I just quickly voted and supported Councillor Wilson because I feel very strongly like him. So, sorry we're in this procedural quagmire.
No, I'm fine to waive the 24 hours. Obviously, it was a statement, not, it's all looking like things are going to go through with the third and final reading. So we're really going through the motions. The 24 hours, I think, is really, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Lowe, put in place for, for lack of a better word, second thought, sober second thoughts, and not things just going through all in one day and people, pushing an agenda. I think I'm correct in that?
It is definitely, that is part of the reason. The other part of that reason is obviously transparency with the public. So where a council cannot set a meeting, waive the notice requirements, and then the
Yeah.
public doesn't necessarily have the awareness that a meeting is being held until after the fact, or if they happen to come upon it.
But we are in a public meeting right now, so if we were to extend this one, that challenge really isn't a barrier for us today. So
So passing a motion right now would be your notice. However, we would not be extending this meeting. The requirement would be to adjourn this meeting and call a separate meeting to order so that it is actually a separate meeting. And if you're going to do it this way, then this motion requires 2/3 majority.
of course it does. Okay. Let's go through the comments and then we'll talk about next steps. So Councillor Federico, you have a comment?
No, not really. I'm for just kind of getting this wrapped up. I think obviously it's going to go forward anyway. So to bring it back in 24 hours, or, I mean, to be quite honest, I don't know if any of us can handle any more public feedback coming forward. It would be overwhelming. So if we're going to pass it anyways, can we just pass it and then go back out to the community with that final decision? Because it would be a nightmare, actually, to be quite honest.
Councillor Reid?
Yeah, I would echo the same things. I think Councillor Wilson has made a statement, and I hope that he would respect that process and just get on with it. So my preference would be to meet right away. And these are unusual times. This is an unusual situation. I don't see the mayor using this privilege as being anything that the public would object to. I think we just need to get on with our business.
Okay, Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, I agree. Let's do procedurally what we need to do to make this decision happen one way or the other today. So if that's closing this meeting and calling another one for 30 minutes from now, let's do that.
I'd be in favor of 3 minutes from now. Councillor Wilson?
3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds, whatever works.
Councillor Wilson?
I just wanted to recommend, again, in the minority, we can do whatever we want. We can come back in 3 minutes. I thought it would be useful to give the public another week to weigh in on things if this is the way we're going. And I'm sorry to be a stick in the mud. I just feel very strongly about this, and hopefully don't have to do this again in the council term. This isn't something I enjoy doing. I just think it's the right course of action.
I admire you for sticking up for your principles, Councillor Wilson, despite the optics or whatever barriers you perceive are in front of you. So the system allows this to happen, and we're dealing with it. So I'm hearing from around the table that most are in favor of adjourning this meeting, coming back in, did we say 5 minutes or 12:15? And if I heard correctly, Ms. Lowe, we need a motion to do so we need to get 2/3 consent to do that.
That's correct. And yes, it will just give Ms. Knight that 10-minute window to establish another stream separate to a separate meeting. So if you are suggesting 12:15, we should be able to pull that together, recognizing there may be a bit of a delay.
Is that enough time? I'm sorry, I did not mean to just throw out 3 minutes in complete blatant disregard for the work that needs to happen behind the scenes to pull this off.
Yeah, if council could pass the resolution that the special meeting be called for 12:15 on today's date, that should give us enough time to have another stream and agenda set to go.
Okay. Thank you for that. Councillor Federico?
I'll make the motion that council comes back at 12:15 today, which is July 29th, I believe. Is it the 29th? And that we come back and make that third and final vote at 12:15.
Okay, and I have to apologize. Councillor McFadden had a motion on the floor, so I'll be accepting that as an amendment to the date. Councillor McFadden, I'm assuming you'll take that as a friendly amendment? Yes. Okay. All right. So now that we've created that quagmire to wade through, is everybody clear on the question that we'll come back at 12:15 for a second special meeting today to discuss third and final reading? Okay, all those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries. Okay, thank you. We'll adjourn this meeting and we'll see you right here on this very platform at 12:15. Thank you.